Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Webtoon Book Club. Today's episode is Flow. Now, there is something that I wanted to mention with the previous episode, the Godzilla one, that I neglected to mention during it, which was not something to do with the story, but more of overall what that is a part of, which is larger companies and comic illustrators such as DC and Marvel getting involved in Webtoon. To one end, this is kind of a double-edged sword. Because to one end, Webtoon is getting good recognition. Larger companies are recognizing it as a viable site to put out their content and allow other people to experience it in another way. But, of course, the negative side of that is the possibility that Webtoon could go the way of YouTube in the matter of moving away from being more supportive and following in on point with the smaller independent creators that made the site be what it is and what most people are coming to look at, to experience and entertain themselves with, and then focus on the larger companies that are just overall going to make more money and such and whatever. That is something that I hope does not happen, but who knows? All it takes is like one bad form of management, like it did with YouTube, for something like that to occur, and suddenly Webtoon is kind of not as this fun site as what it used to be. But I guess on the same end, unlike YouTube, which was kind of an unmonitored system for a very, very long time, and only because it started to get recognized more did it start to really hammer down and start to move away from its independent creator formatting. To where Webtoon, on the other hand, has kind of always been pretty restrictive. I wouldn't say restrictive in a bad way, but more in the case of what gets put up as an original. Yeah, Canvas is pretty much the Wild West area where you can more or less get away with a lot of stuff. But it's pretty restrained. But it is still kind of restrained. But the original stuff is the stuff that gets monitored, gets checked through, and gets approved. But, with that said, on to Flow. Our story begins in a city, with our main character explaining how the world works. So, I'll do the same. Basically, the world that the story takes place in, there is a force called anima that every person has. And every person has a spirit animal of some kind associated with them. And everybody gets one wish, but depending on the strength of the spirit god that they're attached to, depends on how strong that wish can be. Our main character is seemingly a cat. So, not very strong. He also hasn't made his wish yet. He works at a chicken fast food type place. Yeah. And he gives an order to... Yeah, and he's told that he has to deliver an order out towards a lighthouse. But he kind of pushes it off because it's his birthday and convinces his friend to go do it. And she gladly does. But on the way back, she seems to get caught in a bullying incident, which our main character ends up catching and takes care of the bullies by basically being nimble and clever, even though the bullies are far stronger than him through both physicality and their anima. So the next day, when he's, or no, later that day, when he's on his way home, he ends up getting. Oh, no, I messed that up. No, later in the day, there's another order that he goes to deliver, and it ends up being to the bullies' houses, where they then proceed to not only beat him up, but also, I believe, like, they basically make him go blind. I don't think they entirely remove his eyes, but they definitely screw up his face pretty badly. And he's now blind. So while he's laying in bed with bandages covering his face, he then, in his own desperation, makes his wish. Kind of. Again, he's kind of lost in his own regret. And ends up making a wish to turn back the day and try it again. And he gets his wish granted because his spirit isn't actually just a cat, it is the mythical white tiger. As there are, I believe, 3 or 4 strong spirits that only appear to one individual within a generation or so. And he just happens to have one of them. So the day turns back and he changes how things go. Yeah, he changes how things go at the beginning of the day instead of upsetting the bullies so he doesn't have to deal with them, but because he's now changed events, when his friend goes out to deliver the food to the lighthouse, a sudden tsunami hits, and it ends up killing the friend. But because he made his wish, some people who I guess are able to pick up when wishes are made or something like that. I don't know. It's not explained. Kind of, he catches the eye. Yeah, catch on to him for being stronger than he seems. So he's invited to go to this special school of strong anima users or whatever. It's a special school for those with stronger spirits and animas, but whatever. And he takes up the offer kind of reluctantly because he's not sure about all this, and it seems a bit sketchy. So when he gets to the school, he finds that the other kids see that a cat is coming to their school, this weak person, and they don't want to deal with him. So they send out another kid who gets bullied a lot in that school because he has a strong spirit, but he's one of the weaker of the strong spirits. It's a mouse. I have to figure this stuff out. Basically, what determines the strength of a spirit is basically here's where some broken logic comes into play. It's based on how many people worship that god. And that, in the sense of our reality, that kind of makes sense, where it's like, okay, so the spirits that are a part of, like, the zodiacs are strong, because those are the ones people will focus on the most. The problem with it in this world is everybody knows that all these gods exist anyway. If there's somebody with a cat spirit, you know that god exists. So the problem would be, how can the real life logic of what animal gods or spirits are believed in more over others actually be stronger when everybody knows all of them exist? Very odd and broken logic, but well, just keep on rolling with the story. So the mouse kid basically gives him a test saying, well, he has to figure out how to get down from a pillar that he just decided to create out of nowhere. And tell him, if you can figure out how to get down from there, you can come into the school. So he ends up being late for class when he finally gets down. And gets in trouble for being late, even though he decides to not say what happened or why, because he just believes that's just how that works. He just believes the lies he was told. Because sure. So, going through his days at school, yeah. None of the other students are nice to him. They all act like crap to him, especially the, I think, student council president or something like that. She's not very nice to him either. She's particularly not nice to him. Why do I mention her? Because she's an important character to the story, along with the mouse kid and a few other characters that I can't remember a lot of. So basically, these characters are going to be a big group gang. Our main heroes, they'll go on the grand adventure that we'll eventually get to. So, events are happening in school. One particularly is seemingly dark anima is appeared in the library, and the mouse kid and main character try to save somebody who's in danger. And it doesn't go all that great. He's alive, but very hurt. I think he broke some limbs. Or something. And the characters that tried to save him got in trouble for it. Because why not? The next event that occurs is this sports competition thing. Where all the kids have to compete, where kids that sign up compete in varying challenges to, I guess, see who's the best in the school or something like that. But during midway through the competitions, which I'm not going to explain because they're not that important, the girl that was initially in charge for signups, I guess, ends up attacking the entire thing and turning everything into a giant ruckus. So our characters have to try and defeat her, along with, I think, a few others. And once all is said and done in that matter, what we end up finding is she's dead now. Yeah. She's just dead now. In fact, she may have been dead the entire time. And being used essentially as a puppet. We'll find out why later. So now there's this big old mystery thing going on, and our main slew of characters gets dragged aside to something to try and meet together with. They reveal that the main character is the White Tiger, even though we kind of knew that as the audience earlier. But he didn't know it because he was blind at the time. And he's also kind of stupid. So they reveal he's White Tiger. The mean girl doesn't really believe, is kind of baffled by this. Because it's like, how is that possible? And they say that they all have to go find the Black Turtle. Well, they already know where Black Turtle is at. They just gotta go get her. So they all go to where Black Turtle lives, which is this little girl who lives in a big freaking mansion. So they all meet up with her. They all have a nice, lunch or whatever. And they play a life-size game of chess. on a giant chessboard. Which halfway through that game reveals the whole thing was a trap. Even for Black Turtle, the whole place got infiltrated by the main villain, who is Blue Dragon, who's not actually there, but his minions are. Or followers, or whatever you want to consider it. He is the main baddie, and his main goal is to eliminate all the anima in the world. Why? Because he wants to make a world without anima, without people just competing with each other to see who is the strongest. And who can basically bring the other to death or near death. Because what you find out is anytime anybody in this story uses anima as a offensive means to attack others, they end up going to the point where they're pretty much nearly killing people. And in some cases, indeed killing some people. Yeah. You find out a lot of characters in this story are very much not likable. Even if they're only shorthand characters. Hey. Well, I'll get to it. So, they all end up escaping Black Turtle's mansion, and after some more stuff and talking and going over things, they end up finding that they need to go to where Black Turtle's main homestead is, or where he's basing himself, which is this city that's underneath a lake, and it's protected from being flooded by, I guess, some anima magic bullshit or whatever. And they end up finding the person who is responsible for a lot, which this whole underwater city is like basically Las Vegas. It is a gambling city where people gamble their anima. So they end up having to find the person who is responsible for a lot of the anima trading stuff there or whatever. I don't know. He's a smart guy who invents stuff. So they end up finding him, and they end up finding this story that it was like, because I guess they're holding his sister hostage or something like that, he's agreed to work with Blue Dragon to just make him stuff whatever he needs. So they reveal he kind of reveals the main plan of Blue Dragon, or at least what he knows of it. Several fights break out this story. This story does have a good amount of combat and fighting in it. And they do end up having to fight while they are on their way to something else. And that something else is a underground facility where I guess people who have died or something are basically cloned into these like controllable puppets or whatever. And the school principal is there, and he ends up finding that the girl that completely destroyed the competition was apparently the clone of his daughter or something. And he ends up breaking down. And this is where we come into another broken logic incident, where he explains that he wanted to create the school to help the kids, to help strong anima kids learn to control their anima and use it for good and not for selfish reasons. And he did so because of his own selfishness with anima, with the strength of anima in the past, which ended up causing him to lose his daughter and wife. But I would definitely say the broken logic here is he was very bad at it. As our introduction to the school, and the entire time we witnessed the school as it was operating as one, everybody who thought they had stronger anima basically just completely bullied and beat up everybody else that they thought was weaker than them. And they did it relentlessly, constantly, and all the time. And there didn't seem to be any thing in place to stop that from happening. Because it's not like they did it where nobody could see. They were literally just right out in the open where everybody could witness. And nothing was done about it, ever. So yeah, create a school where everybody would use their anima for good instead of selfishness. Yeah, well, you completely failed on that front by what we have seen. Anyway, he dies. Trying to stop the whole thing or whatever. Yeah. So the whole facility goes up, but they realize it's too late. Blue Dragon has already set up his place to put his whole plan into motion. And that location is the school. So they all have to go back to the school, sneak in, try and find their way. They all end up getting into combat with with some characters that we haven't seen since earlier in the story, along with some minions or along with some Blue Dragon followers or whatever. While the mean girl and the main character go to fight Blue Dragon himself, which ends up going not great because Blue Dragon ends up activating his machine, sucking up all the anime in the world to try and eliminate it. And what I failed to mention was a lot of the questing in this story was to help the main character have the ability to get a second wish, because apparently that is a possibility, at least for the main, like, top spirits or whatever. And he ends up managing to get a second wish, which is to go back in time to stop Blue Dragon from ever starting his plans into motion. Which, yeah, he goes, wait, nope, that's wrong. His wish is to actually go into the future. I think it was by impulse, go into the future to try and escape doom. And he ends up going into the future where where it's not gloom and doom. People are actually happy, and it seems very peaceful. And he finds himself, and he has a kid, and he's actually married to the mean girl. But he doesn't get to meet his where he's kind of shocked that that he got married to her. But none of the audience is, because that was laid on, I wouldn't say heavily or subtly. It's more that the author was just like, yep, this is a thing. Also, everybody shipped it. So, whatever. But his future self tries to convince him, it's just like, just let it happen. Just let it happen and don't bother. But our main character can't accept that. So he ends up going into the far past to try and stop Blue Dragon before anything happens. And what he ends up finding out is Blue Dragon died in the school. A horrible incident involving bullying resulted in him dying in gym class. So, but the Blue Dragon spirit ended up latching itself. Well, I can't remember if it's a spirit or not, but his younger brother bared witness to this and ended up vowing himself to get rid of anima because it killed because the greed of it killed his brother. So, yeah. So Blue Dragon is not actually Blue Dragon, it's just the younger brother of Blue Dragon, who just happened to be very smart and clever to get as far as he has with his plan. So now our character time travels to a little bit forward to where the beginning of the story is, and I guess somehow convinces the brother to not go on a rampage or something by being nice to him or something of that matter. Even though that doesn't really make sense because he was already at the pathway point to go down, and let's just put it like this. The story towards the end here, once it introduces time travel, basically eliminates all sense of logic, and it kind of just fucks up its own ending. Because it doesn't seem to actually care of having a coherent timeline or anything that makes logical sense when it comes down to it. It really literally just jumps from point to point, changes stuff, expects that the future wouldn't have changed from that, but he's also trying to change the future. It's easier just to say this story doesn't know how time travel works, and it just fucks up its own ending than actually trying to wrap your head around the illogicalness of putting this shit together. It is just a complete mess. But he stops it from happening. I think the friend still dies, or not. I don't know. But everything becomes, nice and peaceful. Everybody's happy and gets their nice little happy ending. And that's the end of the story. If you couldn't tell, there's a lot of things about this story that annoy me. But here's the thing. If this story seemed like one that was seemed like something that was really good and possibly exciting and something you might want to check out, here's my advice for you. Don't. As fun as this story might seem, it is a slog to get through. And for one simple reason, the author doesn't know how to write characters. The writing in this story is pretty bad. There's so much of what can be a good story here, but it is fundamentally broken by the fact that the writing is not good. The dialogue is bland. The 90% of the story is just explaining stuff and just saying blanket things of, well, this is what we're going to do and we're going here. It is mostly just exposition and talking about going to do things. And I checked throughout most of the comments in this story, and a lot of the comments for most of the story is along that lines as well, just saying how bad the writing is and how the dialogue is basically interchangeable. That you could literally have any character say any of the dialogue that appears in this story and it wouldn't change a thing. Because the characters themselves lack character and personality. There's hints of what can be a personality-driven character. It's an instance where you can tell the author knew how these characters would act, react, and in their head what type of person each and every character was. But she fails to present that in the story. Because in the story, you don't see these characters actually present real thorough personality or character. And anytime they do, it's entirely unlikable. I would definitely say pretty much every character in this story is extremely unlikable. Because the first part of the story, I would say, is when these characters have the most amount of character and personality. It's still not much, but what it is them acting like terrible people. And acting with this hierarchy mentality of, well, I have a stronger anima, so that means I can basically do I can basically bully you as much as I want. That's what you get. That's pretty much what is presented throughout this whole story is anybody who thinks they have a stronger spirit acts like they can just treat everybody beneath them with just pure disrespect, and to the point where they can essentially just beat the ever-living crap out of them to the point of almost killing them. and in some instances, indeed killing them. Like, I would say when the character gets put to the future, where you see this world where there's no anima and it seems very peaceful and nice. And my initial reaction to that is, oh, yeah, no, this is a far better future than the reality of the hell that you live in currently. And then they reveal, oh yeah, like 9 out of 10 people died when their anima was removed because it's just such a horrible shock of a thing that most people aren't strong enough to survive that. And I don't know if that was an already planned out thing or if the author possibly put that in because everybody was like, this is a far better reality than what he's trying to save. And I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt too much if the author put that in. Probably just like shoehorned that in because everybody was like, yeah, no, I would rather live in the world. I'd rather live in this future than their own reality. Because that's where a lot of the comments was until that point. And even then, some people were just like, you know what, I'd be willing to risk it because this world sucks that much. And even our main character, he starts out as like this kind of funny, quirky guy who's kind of a bit dumb. But then as soon as he realizes he's the White Tiger, well, he also kind of just turns into a bit of a jerk and acts just kind of terrible as well throughout the rest of the story. So even he becomes completely unlikable. Like, just overall, it's kind of just bad characters, bad writing, and very little personality. With just way too much exposition. It's like a Shyamalan. It's like a bad Shyamalan movie where it's just mostly exposition and explaining stuff. Except instead of the characters aren't as soulless and hollow. It's like, no, they clearly have something there. It's just not a whole lot of something. But I am not entirely done with this piece. And I have a lot more aggravation about it to get out. But this is going to be paired up as a companion piece with another story that I will talk about next week. So, you want to hear about that and want to hear me go on a complete unbridled rant about how this and that other one is two of the worst stories I've ever read. Two of the most fundamentally worst stories I have read. Tune in next week for that. But for right now, this is where I'm going to end this story. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.